So it's a movable feast. It's something you can do all sorts of things with. It's full of contradictions. Satanism is full of contradictions, and I think the power of monotheist Abrahamic religion is it's a totalitarian belief system, and totalitarian systems are strong. That's how you explain, for example, how Germany, under the Third Reich, has such power, is that people believing in one thing, people all moving in the same direction, is powerful.
Right.
It's
That's the definition of fascism,
Yes, it's
one twig is breakable. With
yes.
numerous twigs bound together,
Mm.
they're strong. So the idea of everyone thinks the same way, you have a strong populace and you could direct that energy. That's the idea, right? That's the fundamental tenet of totalitarian.
And again, another tangent is something interesting I was reading a while back, was this idea that you have the Second World War as, in many respects, the last moral war. It's very difficult to make a good case for saying we shouldn't have fought that war. There were just so many awful things happening, not all of which were evident at the time, or at least evident to a lot of the population at the time. But, looking back, Nazism did have to be stopped. It was, obviously evil's a problematic term, but it was deeply inhumane. It was awful. And so you have a moral war, and a moral war which we won. The Allies, the Americans, the British, the Australians, all the... And from that, we've slipped into a mindset which assumes that might is right, that the good guys always win, and that this is kind of a negative, or not negative, a problematic intellectual, political position to be in. That actually we assume might is right, and that Satanism runs against that. Satanism says that sometimes the bad guys win, and that maybe that's the world we're in, that the bad guys have won, that maybe there is a case for people standing up and being lightning rods, being rebels. And I guess again we're getting into the situation where you have to define what a rebel is, and rebels become commodified. Punk rock couldn't be more commodified, if it tried. It's massively, it's not rebelling against anything. It's they're advertising butter,
Or Harley Davidson or anything else.
all these examples. It's a movable feast.
Right.
So I think there is a lot of it which is about being a certain kind of person, and I often wonder whether you can help being that kind of person. That you can help being awkward. I sometimes define it as being asking all the wrong questions. I was in a documentary series, and they did an episode on shock rock. And at the tail end of this, they asked everybody they interviewed, they said, and shock rock obviously is a genre of rock music where it uses, taboo in order to promote itself, in order to make a noise. And the question they asked was, is anything shocking anymore? And clearly the answer they wanted was that everyone was saying, oh no, everything's, we've done all the shocking stuff. And my answer, which I regret they didn't use, and I regret it because it's probably about the most worthwhile thing I said during the entire interview, was that I said, oh yes, something is shocking now, and it's all the things which I could say now which you couldn't broadcast. So it moves. What's shocking moves. What's rebellious moves. But it can't just be rebellion for rebellion's sake.
Right. Right, because say in America, the Southern rebels, Confederate flag bearing characters, they cast themselves as rebels, and again, that's sort of the exciting thing behind it, right? Is you're a rebel, but that, again, rebellion for its own sake is not inherently positive. It has to be based on something. And again, I think the characteristics of the Miltonic romantic Lucifer are very, very positive and principled. So the idea of independence, of individualism, these are really, really admirable traits.
But how, to play again devil's advocate, and I'm speaking here very much for someone who's outside of the American political, cultural milieu, is from an outsider you can sort of see how somebody might imagine that the Confederate flag might have that kind of resonance for people. And certainly in Europe, I think that the racial overtones, which I think is the taboo we're talking about here, just don't register with people. And that, kind of the idea that, you can get on to, so for example, the idea of white trash, white southern trash being the last legitimate minority. I suppose minority is the wrong term, but the last legitimate sort of demographic you can be prejudiced against. You can be shitty about these people. So I suspect we're going on a tangent here because you are getting into territory. I mean,
well, again, you're bringing me back to the idea of this aristocratic radicalism, if I could invoke that Nietzschean term, or refined radicalism. I think that's important because, again, anyone could be a rebel. It depends on what's okay at the time. So I'm very much antipathetic to the idea of say, white trash, being legitimated because they're rebels. I think the idea of the sort of refined radicalism of the romantic Satanist types, I think that's what's central to Satanism. As far as Satanism is concerned, we need more of that, more of this sort of exclusiveness, I guess, or that peculiar kind of Nietzschean elitism to it, which is a way of differentiating it from, again, rebellion for its own sake, or whatever else. But you did point out something interesting. I think Satanism is, or perhaps it needs to be, multicultural or multi-countercultural.
Yeah.
In as much as it's something that needs to adapt, metamorphose to the culture in which it exists. So, how do you feel about the issue of, I guess, the tension between trying to have some sort of overarching symbolism, mythology, or whatever else, versus appealing to as many cultures as possible?
I mean, for me, I suppose I'm inclined to see it from a very personal point of view. And for me, this is very much rooted in my history. And there's it's quite, you can take a rebellious stance and say actually that imperialism had positive aspects, that the British Empire is or was admirable in many respects. And that's not to say it's across the board admirable. It's just that you can express that taboo opinion and work with that. And I'm trying to think of a way of putting it. I mean, it's a book it's very much in embryonic form at the moment. is a sort of a satanic history of England. And a lot of that is going to be from an imperialistic point of view. And it's not suggesting that imperialism is nice or colonialism is nice, just so much as it's a feature of human development or political reality, whereby, for example, that the Spanish didn't invade Mesoamerica because the Spanish were nasty and the Aztecs were nice. It was an accident of history, if you like, that the Spanish were more capable of doing this and imposed themselves upon the Aztecs. And that's a good example because, of course, the Aztecs were sons of bitches. That was an evil empire, and which was taken over by a slightly less evil empire. And with the British Empire, we didn't arrive in these various different places and find them as these sort of, gardens of Eden where everyone was frolicking about and having a nice time, and then suddenly we showed up in our red coats and shot people. We did show up in our red coats and shot people, but there were already people shooting each other when we got there. It's just some of the guys who were being shot suddenly thought, let's line up with the guys with red coats, and they'll shoot the other guys as well. So I don't know. There's a sort of, I suppose, a meandering argument here, but for me, a satanic political position is I'm a proud imperialist. So I will fly the flag for Britain and fly the flag for the British Empire because nobody else is. Mm-hmm. Not because I think it's universally good, but because I think there were good things about it. And I think let's look at those and let's work on and build on those, and also identify the aspects of the British Empire that were bad. Let's look at it, warts and all.